7 minutes after 8 o'clock. That's our time here on Sky 99.5 FM. Welcome inside hour number 3 of the Breakfast Round Table for today. Today is Thursday, the 3rd of September 2015, and we are going to be chatting about food security issues and what we've been hearing from the political parties on the matters. We've got on the line with us Omardath Maharaj. Omardath Maharaj, I'm just trying to make sure you are an agricultural economist, yes?
Yes, it does, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Omardath Maharaj, you have had an opportunity to look at a couple of the manifestos and also to attend a couple of the cottage meetings being held by the political parties. And you've had a chance to put your questions to them to find out, what is their take on agriculture development overall and food security issues in particular. Were you comforted by what you heard?
Well, I've been auditing several of the meetings offered by the three main parties, which is the PNM, the UNC, and the ILP, over the past few weeks and months. And there was one direct or live opportunity to do that at one of these conversations with Dr. Rowley. I attended the one in Gulfview. That panel, if I could reflect on it quickly, that panel comprised Mr. Clarence Rambarat, Mr. Faris Alvari, the political leader of the PNM, and the candidate for Labre, Ms. Nicole Oliver. So the reason why I capitalized on that opportunity, that forum, is because those constituencies hover around agriculture and fisheries in the most part, which are Mayaro, San Fernando, West, and Labre. So they have the Gulf of Paria issues and so forth, and Mayaro has its own dichotomy between agriculture and fisheries, so it was an opportunity to raise the issues. Some of the issues came up there would have been the fall-off from this issue with the Gulf oil spill, number one, poverty and all these demographic and socioeconomic circumstances of fishing communities that persist along the Gulf into Labre. And with respect to Mayaro, I questioned Mr. Rambarat about the seaweed issue, which I think is bigger than the airplay it's getting right now. And I also questioned him about building resilience for farmers and fisherfolk, especially in a community, a constituency like his, Mayaro, which that is really the mainstay of the people.
Now, I just want to, you made the point about the sargassum weed infestation. Why are you so concerned about it?
Well, I don't know if you or your listeners had the opportunity to, at least I'm referring to Facebook, one of these news sites, they had photos of Speyside, Tobago. Now, I didn't have the liberty to visit myself, but the complete shoreline, not only the sand, of course, but the waterfront, maybe about a mile offshore, was covered in a carpet of seaweed. All right? Now, that has resounding effects on the tourism in that area, for the sea bathers and whatnot, and those who make a livelihood from the inshore fishery. So if we bring it back home to Mayaro specifically, the questions I posed to Mr. Rambarat. If you get to Mayaro, I mean, it's not constantly happening right now, there's an ease with it, right? But this influx of sargassum seaweed, it might be the new reality. It's not to say that it came for a month and it has ceased or whatever. And the effects of that, if you speak with the fisher folk down there, and we had a consultation with some of the fisher folk and those who depend on the inshore fishery. And what happened, when the seaweed washes ashore, the sea bathing, which we call the local domestic tourism, and so is out the window, because, I mean, you can't bathe amongst that. The fisher folk, their livelihoods are in jeopardy because they cannot, in Mayaro, some of them use the land seines, they pull the nets on sand, right? You cannot do that, of course, because they'll be trapped in the seaweed. The inshore fishery that we average about 2-3 miles from the shore, you can't drag nets or whatever, the boat engines become clogged with the seaweed, and it's a costly thing to maintain. And these people lose an income daily. So, and some of them already very barely surviving, if you want to describe it in that manner.
And the stench from the decomposing seaweed, Mr. Maharaj, this is Edison Carr here. The stench from the decomposing seaweed is revolting.
Yeah. Well, the stench. I didn't describe it that way, of course, but the stench of it. If you carry your family there on the weekend and you pick up that stench, you wouldn't expose or whatnot to this thing. It attracts flies and all these other little biting insects or whatnot. So the tourism product in Mayaro is declining, the inshore fishery is declining, the livelihoods of fisherfolk is declining. And nobody is speaking up to say, I mean, we can't just say compensate for everything, but that is something alike of a natural disaster. Now, it's similar like when you have the oil spill on the Gulf. The people cannot venture into it, they cannot do anything with the product. I'm not saying the fish quality is compromised in Mayaro, of course, but they cannot access to harvest any wild capture fishery. So all these issues, and nobody is speaking to the issues. I don't know if because of the election hustle and, you know.
When we were doing some background into it, we saw that it can actually be very, very beneficial to the agriculture sector to be used, you know, in the soil and everything to help you get a superior quality, you know, product, as it were, if you know how to harvest it and process it and apply it to your soil. So is it that we have too much of a blessing right now rather than looking at it as a curse?
I appreciate the international literature, and I'm not saying it's a curse, but I'm saying the fact is right now we are not harvesting it and using it as manure or all these other solutions that people propose. So it is a curse in its current state. But specifically to use it as manure or whatnot, I had a consultation with the Table and Pineapple Farmers Association, the Guaya Fishing Association. There's a group called WIFA, Women in Fishing Association. Very productive people in the Mayaro, well, at least in the southeastern region. And we all met in Mayaro. We spoke about the seaweed. The fisher folk relayed to me the problems it's posing to their livelihoods, of course, as I just explained. And we took some of this seaweed and we carried it through the processes, as you would see identified on the internet and whatnot, that people have dried it and applied it as manure and whatnot. And it was not directly so. If it is you dry this product, all right, you fill a crocus bag estimate, which is what we did, and you set it to dry or whatnot. In its dried state, that actually breaks up like dust. Remember chili, baby?
Yes.
That in its dried state, it gets as fine, the particle matter is as fine as that. Now, how much of this thing you're really going to extract to make something productive? Now, it is something organic. When it erots, it will add certain values, no doubt. But the salinity of it is another issue. And we set it around a pomsidate tree just as a trial, and we did a media note on it. We did a media release on it, where the farmers, after the consultation, tried it, and the pomsidate tree actually dried. All right? Now, you cannot just say to tell people, start to extract this thing and use it as free manure, because what if people fields now start to dry with the extra salinity? Then you have a serious problem there, all right? So, but not only beyond that, when you had the turtles that were nesting, in the North Coast region, sometime ago, a few years ago, and the machine operator went on the sand, if you recall, I see in the north, and these turtles died or whatnot, right? But to harvest the seaweed, you need similar machinery. I mean, a human being can go and pick up this thing with his hand and fill in a bag. So you cannot tell people carry a backhoe or whatever it is on the sand, scrape this thing into trucks. That might create another havoc that we're not catering for. You know?
In terms of the sustainability of fisheries, Mr. Maharaj, the oil companies looking for where they think they might have reserves would do these seismic surveys, but the fishermen complain bitterly that it drives away the the fish from the spawning areas and so on. It may kill some of them and so on. So on what side would you come down on, seismic surveys for oil or sustainability for the fishing industry?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I'm sure it has plagued generations before my time. But the fact of the matter is that the economic mainstay of the country overall is hinged to the oil and gas sector, which is why activities such as those may have some priority. I know that they would obviously need certain environmental clearances, and so before they could proceed, and built into those clearances would be how it is they intend to compensate for any losses to the fishery and the stakeholders who benefit from it, which are the fisher folk. And they might get a one-time cash payment or so forth. I know these companies, at least in the southeastern region, would invest, like Repsol, for example, would invest in community development projects, different agriculture and retraining projects, and all these other things. But in terms of sustainability of the fishery, clearly if you're chasing all the fish and some dying or whatnot, it is diminishing. And we must find some way to strike amicable balance. But if you want to talk about how it is you're going to do that, that clearly requires policy. And when I spoke to Jessie May yesterday afternoon briefly. The parties right now on offer, if you look at their manifestos, I'm clearly interested in the sections relating to agriculture and food security and whatnot. And the People's Partnership Manifesto, if you look in that document for fish, if you look for the word fish as an abbreviation for fishing and whatnot, I'm not seeing any clear project that is going to benefit the sustainability of the sector. There is language here that speaks to the growth pool. The medium-term policy framework 2011-2014 identified 5 growth pools for targeted economic development, which was the North Coast, Central, Southwest, Tobago, and East Port of Spain. And that is now expanded. Now, I mean, the concept of expanding these growth pools, and so I'm not part of the policy making or deciding side of it. But the fact is, if somebody looking on at this thing, you can't make the whole country trying to be into growth pools. They'll simply eliminate the concept of growth pool and say we go and develop Trinidad and Tobago, which is supposed to be the main intention, right? I was hoping to see some specific things that lends itself, given that you had these oil spills. They have all these things about food prices, getting protein from the sea. There was a major trust in this thing, investing in tilapia. I'm not seeing any clear results to say, well, why we should keep investing in it. A lot of money has gone into pushing the tilapia industry. And if I recall, I mean, when I was growing up, you learned that an island is a small piece of land surrounded by water.
Yes.
And with a definition like that in mind, it breeds in your mind the culture that our taste and preferences come from the sea.
So much of our tilapia is imported. Mr. Maharaj, so much of our tilapia is imported.
Yeah, well, a large volume of it is imported. And, I mean, if you import anything to satisfy a certain taste and you try to boost, you look at the local ones and trying to get the volume up, the size up, the cost of production. I mean, in everything, there's a sunrise period in any industry, no doubt. But I'm saying we have invested a lot of money in the on-land fishery or the in-tank or whatnot, trying this aquaculture thing. And maybe tilapia simply wasn't the best product, because if we have a taste, I am convinced that we have a taste for marine food, seafood in that sense, then where's the investment and the push in that, right? But that's to conclude my point about the fishing. If you look at the People's Partnership Manifesto, I was looking for a clear something on fishing, a project. Maybe it speaks to the blue economy and whatnot, fisheries in the broad sense of the language. But the only thing that struck me is with the San Fernando waterfront project. A point that they have here is to enhance the facility and options for fishermen. Now, you have to be clear. I'm not sure how much people in San Fernando West from the fishery are reading these documents. And my thing is that we should be educating the electors about now. Trying to regulate a state where you need more political knowledge. People talk about manifesto and plan, and they have this back and forth. But how much people taking the time to read and understand what it is, what is they getting yourself into? Because after the fact, you can't complain that you ain't get this and you ain't get that, because nobody tell you up front. And it speaks to options for fishermen. Now, what are the options for fishermen? Is it that we're going to get people out of the industry? Is it that we're going to maybe come with artificial reefs or something to enhance the Gulf fishery? You understand what I'm saying? So we're looking for clear, not in agriculture, just focusing on the fishery as the Mayaro topic came up. And the other platform, which is the People's National Movement, they speak to, if I recall correctly, a first-class road to Moruga. They promised a fishing port, a port in Moruga, and a first-class fishing facility.
Did they speak of something called a Ministry of Rural Development?
Yeah. I heard Dr. Rowley spoke about that. I picked up on that. I think it was around the time of the last local government election in Moruga. If it was not then, maybe at their anniversary. But I read on that where he said he first brought the idea of this Ministry of Rural Development. And I actually questioned the gentleman about it at the Gulf View Community Center where he had these conversations. But the question at that time was about housing. How it is people in, let me call them rural communities of certain socioeconomic standing, what it is this Ministry of Rural Development will be comprised of, what is going to do, at least in terms of housing, because we have to appreciate that these people, either in fishing communities or some rural communities, they cannot enter any formal credit market to improve housing or real estate. You understand, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So that this Ministry of Rural Development, what are its policies, its thinking and whatnot, And he explained, to a comforting extent. And I mean, I could well imagine these things on their internal side are being planned. But there's this Rural Development Ministry. I could see it being comprising of some of the facets we have existing right now in the ministerial sense and agency sense. And I think that concept of a Ministry of Rural Development is going to change, or is supposed to change. Sorry, it's supposed to change the face of development talks in Trinidad.
You know, Mr. Maharaj, I had sort of formulated in my head a sort of doomsday scenario. We look at, California, we look at New Zealand, we look at Australia and so on. A lot of the places from which we import food, but they're having their own problems, drought, climate change and so on. Suppose one day it happens that we have the money to buy the food, but these countries say, you know what, we have to feed our own people and we cannot export any food to you. And we have no kind of semblance really of the agricultural sector. What will happen to Trinidad and Tobago as far as food is concerned?
Well, maybe I might be one of the doomsday supporters. I'm not sure if my view will come across that way, but the fact of the matter is right now, I read recently where a statement was put out by Neil and Massey that they are not accessing sufficient foreign exchange to do their purchases and so abroad, their transactions abroad, all right? Now, Neil and Massey is a very big, Massey stores turn out to be a very big conglomerate in the country. Now, I don't know if that specific statement related to its food stores, its car imports, its chemical imports, or whatever it be. Now, if it comes to food, it means that we do not have enough foreign exchange reserves to buy the things that we would comfortably consume, if we're speaking to food, all right? So that's one thing. So we may not even have the money to buy the food. And on the other side of the coin, yes, in fact, drought and adverse weather and all these other things impact our growing world population, will impact on the volume of food commodities available for export to small island states like ourselves. In that scenario, which is what people have been saying for decades back, we would always keep waiting until the last minute when the oil drying up, then to say agriculture and so forth becomes important, And I think we are at that doorstep right now, where the oil sector is questionable. We're talking diversification again. Anytime the oil price low, we start to saying diversification. We're coming back to this agriculture thing. You understand? So we keep running through this treadmill in Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to the agriculture sector. And the sector itself is crying out. The Table and Pineapple Farmers Association, I think it was in June, had called for a national conversation on agriculture and fisheries. Now is the time for it. We are going to a general election, all right? And if you have a national conversation or any kind of conversation on agriculture and fisheries, if you're looking for votes, there are a few thousand people who are farmers and fishers. And I'm sure each household have an average, maybe 4 to 5 people. So they may be able to influence their own families if they think they could benefit in some way. And that just went in the wind. And I'm saying that you cannot keep playing this thing. Agriculture is not only, I see Mr. Omardath started, Dr. Rowley, maybe about a week ago or so, announced him as his minister in waiting for the Ministry of Agriculture. And the gentleman produced a manifesto for his constituency. I'm sure other candidates have done similarly, but his is being circulated online. I'm not sure if you had the liberty to view the document. And in it, he identified, having spent his time on the constituency and whatnot, he identified this thematic thing called EAST, Energy, Agriculture, Services and Tourism, which are the mainstay in summary of the constituency. And the document went into great detail. I was shocked, to invest this amount of time to research this thing. And he outlined, if we stick to the agriculture thing, his clear intention, the commodities produced in the various regions, and what are the main things he wants to implement if given the mandate from day one. I mean, sure, they'll do other things as well, no doubt. But specifically for Meharo, it's all about modern processing facilities and all these other things, training programs, which are very important, of course. And when people see investing the time and energy into these things, clearly it will attract some, because you won't have your children and you send them to school, and there's no school in Trinidad that graduates a first degree in fishing. Yes, the university has a degree in agriculture and whatnot, agribusiness management. But you don't graduate as a farmer, because yes, you have this paper entity and this whole big view of the sector. But where is it going to find land from? You know, you have all these other things that will go into this thing. Where's the proudness of the sector? Because it's still up to now. I mean, in the year 2015, we've spent so much money. We've gone through how many oil booms. And still, you drive along any random main road and you see some children on the afternoon standing selling the little vegetables and whatnot. And the parents somewhere in the background because they're tired from standing there since morning trying to sell the same thing.
So, Mr. Maharaj, if you had the opportunity to advise a government that one or two particular areas would be sustainable for agriculture, which would it be? Would it be rice that we're going to, and I'm speaking about investment in big time, would it be rice? Would it be coconuts? You know, coconuts is making a big comeback now all over the world. What product would you advise a government to go into big time?
Well, the question comes down to the commodity and the readiness, and everything has a gestation period, all right? If we speak to the coconuts, it had the red ring disease and whatnot. There was some technical exchange between India trying to solve it. I'm not sure of the progress they've made and trying to resource the thing. Now, the copra, people started to demonize this thing some years ago with the health and whatnot, and then the world...
Yeah, it's good now. It's good now.
Yeah, and now it's good. It's the best thing that ever touched the earth and whatnot. But maybe if you invest in coconut and that has a gestation period of a few years, the market might go again into something else. You see? So you need, I mean, I can't just tell you often, just throw your money in cocoa, throw your money here, throw your money there. But the fact is, you need to consult with the people who are out there sweating. You need to do serious market analysis.
What about rice? What about rice? What about rice?
Well, we can knock something off the food import bill. All right? If we have the land, because look at the Two Brothers Rice Project in Kearney there. That's about 2,000 acres in Kearney area, adjoining the highway and the main road.
But has that experiment been successful?
Well, that's the thing. That's what we need to sort of call it.
And I can think back a few decades when they tried a similar experiment in Nariva.
Yeah, yes. And that turned out to be another issue. I know Minister Maharaj started, I think it's in Il Carmen, they have some rice projects there and whatnot. But we need to sort of call on these things, see the volume, the cost of production, how it's getting to the mills and whatnot, the value added to the farmers. There needs to be serious market analysis now to sort of look at the feasibility and how much money we invest, because we keep saying we spend millions in buy local, eat local, and when you go to any fruit shed, the first thing you see is apple, grapes, and imported bananas from somewhere. Adon Aiton, lecturer at the UWI, attached to Cardi, he did a study recently on the East-West corridor on the purchasing habits of women, assuming with the assumption, of course, that women go and buy on behalf of the household, these small trips, right? And their purchasing behavior for fruits is that the top fruit they would buy is apple, grapes, and bananas, all of which are important. I think number 4 was watermelon. You see? Watermelon is grown locally. We have watermelon country in Kernahan and whatnot. But even in Kernahan, these people, they have been investing their time. They are generations into this watermelon industry. I know a farmer, Roger. Roger have about 25 acres of watermelon on the East Coast. 25 acres. And the fact is, when you grow these volumes, these men have the expertise, the capacity, the drive, the whatnot. And they find their own labor and they do the thing. And where it going from there? Is it that a truck coming in the night paying you penny a pound next to nothing, and they're taking this volume and they're carrying it, you see? So, and exactly, so we need to invest. Yes, your people grow more, and you're talking this thing about grow more. But the point is, when people actually do, if they take you seriously and they grow more, what's going to happen? Is it that they have to dump? Is it that the market going to just keep spiking and falling? We need to have serious marketing channels. We need to know where the volume is going. Because if you look at the food import bill, you would see the top items and we'd say, yes, okay, let me just say, assume we are importing pumpkins. I'm just making a naive example. You're importing pumpkins and you say, okay, we could grow this locally. You can't just go and line up farmer and you start to grow pumpkin like you're crazy. Because, they'll grow these things in Orapooch and Beach and wherever. And where you going to carry it from there? How is that going to reach on a table in Westmoreland? You see? And is it that, are you only simply looking at the import bill, looking for the commodity items in its raw form and saying we need to grow that? It's not that simple, because maybe the large importer of the pumpkin, that person, assume is one of these bigger companies, is processing it into some ketchup paste or some other paste, you see? So there needs to be serious conversation with the stakeholders. That's the concept of this national conversation. You have the Food and Beverage Industry Development Committee. You have all these other stakeholders, Supermarkets Association, all these other stakeholders. And I mean, you can't go after every possible commodity, but you could identify certain line items and chase after it in a meaningful way. Invest your time that way.
So this is
And
the reason I asked
revolutionize the
you
industry.
which, if you had a choice to advise a government, which particular product you think would be most viable now.
Well, it comes down I'm not saying I have an answer for a specific commodity. I do not have all the data to simply relay that. But I'm saying to you that there's a large consumption of, if you want specific examples, there's meat consumption, right? A dozen of eggs range right now in supermarkets between $24 to $31 a dozen. No poor to middle income family right now could comfortably afford something as simple as eggs for their children for breakfast. I am not convinced. And if you talk to women or whoever it is in the supermarket, going to buy eggs, and they'll tell you that is Mr. Egg, and they leave that there and they go. So, in terms of putting your money, I think it's not only about getting an economic return, but it's to understand the consumption food basket of individuals, whether it be into poultry, small ruminants, that's meat production. We import tons of goat meat and sheep, or lamb meat and whatnot. So you look at building these industries, you have a sheep and goat, trying to be a sheep and goat society or not, this fellow, Shiraz Khan. Right? He is very vocal, all over the place and whatnot, but the fact of the matter is, the man is in the industry and you need some figureheads to lead things. Talk to the man. You know,
But we are self-sufficient in chicken now, aren't we?
Right. Well, the poultry industry, they open up the market to import leg and thighs, these frozen leg and thighs, what you call dark meat. The American markets consume the white meat, which are more the breast meat and so forth. They into these fillets and nuggets and all these nice things. And the leg and thighs, they call the dark meat, are really secondary products. Right? So they make their money on the breast and wing, that part of the chicken. And if you want to use a word as strong as dump, they sell off the frozen leg and thighs elsewhere. And that has been coming in. So if you go in any random mall and you look at the food servings, I am taking a bet that the majority of it, you'll only see leg and thighs on offer. And why is that? Because that's cheaper imported meat, and it's chicken. Everybody knows chicken. The quality of it is another discussion, and how it compromises local growers is an issue. But the agriculture sector, within the agriculture sector, poultry is the largest contributor to agriculture GDP. The market for itself is very well organized. You have the large players who we don't need to name right now in the chicken industry. It's structured in a way, you don't see chicken advertising, right? They don't run an ad saying chicken advertising, however they would advertise chicken. But we see some things pushing for tilapia and whatnot, and you see a lot of ads in the papers, billboards and whatnot. So what is the difference? And then in the poultry industry, it's organized such a way, like you have the pluck shops associations and whatnot. Very formal manner, and it makes the largest contribution. We consume over 1 million pounds of chicken per week in Toronto. Very large market, cheap protein, whatnot. All right? And if I recall from my own reading, the Vision 2020 of the last People's Partnership government, the thinking, at least for the agriculture sector, was to transplant some of those properties and characteristics into other commodities. So you saw there was a need to transpose it onto the fishing sector, where, if you recall some years ago, you had people by the side of the road selling fish in these little stores all over the place. The van would drive and blow. You remember that kind of thing? And it was normal for us, but really in the food trade, it is unsanitary. You have
especially for
sanitary
fish
and phytosanitary risk and whatnot, right? And within that document, it created something called the Seafood Industry Development Company to execute that mandate in terms of modernizing the seafood value chain and all these other things. Now, what has been the outcome of that? What is the effectiveness of this company looking back today, given that you have a government that made a paradigm shift in the planning processes of the country? What is the mandate of that state enterprise today? You see? So there are things that fall by the wayside and things that just get blown all about. In some years ago, maybe about a decade ago, the European Union cut on our end, it stopped exports of seafood from Trinidad and Tobago because it cited sanitary and phytosanitary risk and so forth in the harvesting. And that market closed, right? So what have we done a decade after in fishing communities to reopen that market? What have we done? I don't think we have done anything. And you cannot say, well, all you could produce is consume right here, so you don't need to. That's not the point. You see? So a lot of the conversations in agriculture coming back to a simple thing as consultation and collaboration, because there are people still with the energy and the will. You have a lot of lobby groups. You have Kishore Budram in Claxton Bay. You have Morris in Toko Fishing Association. You have Gomfa Guaya Otameharo Fishing Association. You know what I mean? You have people around who are leaders in their own right, and they know to get people on board and whatnot. Why are we not embracing these people? Like you have somebody like Gary Aboud, and people say this man was making noise that he don't even fish and he talking about fishermen. The long and the short is that the man is presenting a voice for the voiceless, so give the man a hearing. And if the man is pro-development, he must have something to propose on the way forward, you know. I'm not saying that any government comes into place. Well, at least on the PNM side, they've named Client Ramarat. I'm not saying that this man have the solutions to everything. But the approach must be consultation with people who have some ideas. You can't just keep...
And it must be backed up by sound research and empirical data.
Well, certainly. If you have to spend public funds, it must be justified and it must carry with it some credibility. You know, invest public funds like that. But you know what I mean? I'm saying Trinidad and we have the capacity, we have the knowledge, the wherewithal, the drive, whatnot. And it simply comes down to leadership and management of the sector and placing the sector in its correct position within the national economic sphere. You don't cast agriculture aside. I mean, within a year or two, God willing, I'll finish a PhD in agricultural economics. And there are several other people like myself. There's a faculty at the university. And I mean, people don't get into this thing because it's a dead-end industry and they don't pay like the oil industry. Yeah, all these sort of phobias that people put out in the public environment. Clearly, it is of importance.
So we're going to see a renaissance, as it were, in the sector once your stream of people come to the fore.
Well, I have no stream of people I like that. I'm saying that is what I think the sector could benefit from. I am not sure if the People's Partnership returns to office. I am not sure who will be their minister of, well, on their side they call it the Ministry of Food Production. I'm not sure who will return as the minister for that. What will that be that person's intention, their worldview, and how it is they embrace the stakeholders they get going forward. I mean, the Ministry of Food Production itself, you cannot blanket or blank farming groups and so because you feel it's PNM and this and that. You can't manage a ministry or a sector in that manner. And take it upon the ministry itself. You can't take it upon the ministry itself. Look like you have a company called Carney Green, right? Before that, it was the Carney Green Initiative that was transformed into a state enterprise. You have a government agency, an arm that's championing local food production that set after itself to grow all the things that it thinks is in short supply. I mean, why is it the government of Trinidad and Tobago in 2015, when you talk about a diversified economy and knowledge-based society, and you have these 7 pillars of development and all these paradigm shifts, why the government growing tomatoes and pepper and whatnot and just put on how much acres are planting? I mean, I live very close to it. And you have farmers in Kunupia, for example. They went to the wholesale market some months ago, about 6 months ago, and had to sell pumpkins for 15 cents wholesale a pound. And I am sure there are people who go to the supermarket, they get 15 cents in and they leave it on the cash counter. It is really of no value. Coins, the currency is really like that right now. And you have people sweating to grow it. Half of the time they wouldn't even bother to harvest it because that's further loss to harvest and bring it to market. So they plow it back into the field and let it rot there.
You know, Mr. Maharaj, I was wondering if the government shouldn't take away some of the subsidies from gasoline and put it into the agricultural sector, because irony of ironies is that a lot of the people who now getting back some of the Caroni lands are not continuing in agriculture. They're building houses and so on. So shouldn't the government be very proactive and subsidize a lot of the agricultural sector now and take away some of that subsidies from gasoline?
Well, I'm not sure where they would divert these funds from, but I know that I think it was Omardath Maharaj, he revamped the agriculture incentive program early into his time at the Ministry of Food Production. And the uptake of the agriculture incentive program, we need to see some data as to which incentives people are accessing. And one would tend to believe that people access this thing. You have your farmer's badge, you have your 2 acres, you go ADB, you take your money and you buy a big van. Whatever type of vehicle, and that is it. You use the incentive program to access a cheaper vehicle. That's common for general. That's not specific to me, you know. But In the PNM manifesto, I know that they spoke about expanding the incentives for farmers and fisherfolk. I'm making reference to Clarence because I've been following his campaign since he was named for agriculture, of course. And he spoke about increasing the incentives. The same thing I'm talking about consultation on agriculture policy.
Mm-hmm.
All these other things are wide-ranging program with different types of tax and duty incentives and subsidies for the vehicles, chemical, fishing vessels, boat engines, all these other implements to make entry or penetration into the sector easier. And both sides have been talking about increasing access to land use. I think the People's Partnership proposed a youth in agriculture, something where I don't know if they would categorize our age as youth. They might have some kind of.
I think the plan is to expand the YAPA program. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, you see, that's another thing. In 2007 election, they if I'm not misquoting myself, but I think it's about 2007, when people in the People's Partnership had a very dissenting view of the YAPA.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And even the Prime Minister, in her doing some reading, and in her 2006-2007 budget response, she spoke about the YAPA and whatnot, and different people had different views about this thing. And to get back to these programs, you have already put a licking on the public servants who try to put this thing together and carry it through beyond government to government. All right? And to say that they're coming back with this new beauty and you're celebrating the people and the graduates and whatnot, it really kind of drives a wedge in the intention. And people looking on, people constantly looking on. I read the first thing I do in mornings after I say prayers and see the children is to, read the news and look at these comments being made and people talk at free will. And Trinidad is a small society and they can't mash everybody corner and come back the next day. So, you understand that? They depend on them to that manner. So.
We are speaking with agricultural economist Omardath Maharaj. Omardath, we have to wrap it up now, and I know that you have to head off to a meeting in just a little bit. But we want to say thanks, and of course this conversation is not over because after elections, we're looking ahead to budget 2015-2016,
yes.
And we definitely will want to have that discussion again, Yes?
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And
thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Take care. Enjoy your day.
Okay. Agricultural economist Omardath Maharaj putting an interesting perspective on some of the offerings in terms of agricultural development and food security issues and rural development as well.
I was so surprised.
And flagging that sargassum weed issue as a major issue that is not getting the kind of attention it deserves.
Buffalipso was a great idea of, I'm trying to remember the agriculturalist who did it. He crossed the regular cow with the buffalo and so on. And I think we exported Buffalipso to somewhere in Australia, New Zealand, and also in Cuba and so on. But for some reason, we never pursued it sufficiently in Trinidad and Tobago because the meat of the buffalo contained less fat and that kind of thing, very, very lean. And these were huge animals. You're going down to Mayaro and you see these animals crossing the street, huge. And all of, just nothing happened. So I think, I don't know, now and then you may see some buffalo as you're approaching Ottawa and these places, but you don't see the buffalo again at all. And this was such a wonderful project. Where are the buffalo people? Where are the buffalo?
We're looking at 8 to 45.